Fabulous book by Sagarika, Why I Am a Liberal, a manifesto for Indians who believe in individual freedom. Favorite Ghalib couplet. And I thought he would recite Dile Nadan Tujhe Hua Kya Hai और ये ना थी हमारी किस्मत. But he recited this to me. हाँ वो नहीं खुदा परस्त, जाओ वो बेवफा सही, जिसको हो दीनो दिल अजीज उसकी गली में जाए क्यों. This, I think, is the simplest and most beautiful explanation of individual choices and of liberalism. And there can be no better way to celebrate his memory than to each other that one can't be answered without the other. And my first question is, why I am a liberal? What or who is a liberal actually? And what are you? And related to that, my second question is what is the need to explain to people who you are or whether you are a liberal or not? So therefore, why this book? I'm aware that there are similar writings. Of course, Bhagat Singh had famously written, Why I Am Atheist. And more recently, Shashi has written, Why I Am Hindu, and Kancha Elaiya, Why I Am Not Hindu. So what is this need to tell people whether you are a liberal or not, and what is a liberal?
Thanks so much, Saif. It's lovely to be here at the Kasauli Lit Fest. Thanks so much for that very generous introduction. I'm so glad that we're celebrating the spirit of Khushwant Singh. When I was a young journalist, I remember meeting him, and I remember him telling me, never stop asking questions and always carry your resignation letter in your pocket. So if you have a problem, just put that letter in and leave. But never stop asking questions. So thanks so much for being here, Saif, and I'm really sorry that Nayanthara Sehgal, who was supposed to join me for this discussion, cannot be here. But as you know, she's under a sedition charge. Nayanthara Sehgal, the doyen of writing in India, an independent spirit, the fact that she has been charged with sedition, I think is war against the state. I think is really a shame for all of us in our times today. So she can't be here, but I'm really glad that we're doing this session anyway. Thanks, Saif, for asking me why I've written this book, Why I'm a Liberal. It's not easy being a liberal these days. You can get called all kinds of names. You can be called a fibberal, or you can be called a libtard, which I'm told is a combination of liberal and retard. Makes you a libtard. So it's fashionable to hate liberals. I wanted to write this book because I wanted to rescue the term liberal and argue that there is a need for a functioning liberal position at a time when populist nationalism and religious nationalism is so dominant. Now, what is liberalism? Liberalism comes from liberty. How many of us have been inspired by the famous statue in America? The Statue of Liberty. Liberty, lawful pursuit of individual freedom, is at the center of our Constitution. Our Constitution is a radical, revolutionary doctrine. It is a revolutionary document in a country that is beset with regressive identities and beset with traditional values. The Constitution is modern and forward-looking and highly liberal. And at the center of our Constitution is individual freedom. What is liberalism? Liberalism comes from liberty. How many of you here would identify as liberal? Yay, almost a majority. So liberalism comes from liberty. Liberalism is the political ideal that calls for greater freedom for the individual, for civic freedom, social freedom, economic freedom for the individual, and less power for the coercive, centralized state or the big state. Now, there are several kinds of liberals. There are left liberals, there are right liberals, there are classical liberals, there are revisionist liberals, there are orthodox liberals. But broadly, liberals adhere to the doctrine of the individual freedom as opposed to the coercive big state. Now, what is the state? The state is the whole fixed structure. It is the government, the parliament, the judiciary, the armed forces, all of this is the state. In my book, I have coined a term called the big state. The big state is when a political party takes over the organs of state and pushes its partisan political agenda through the neutral organs of the state. This is a state capture by a political party. This is an ideological capture by a political party of the organs of state. And the state then becomes a big state because it takes over it overwhelms the other institutions of the state. Now, many people believe that liberalism is a Western ideology. It is the ideology of the Macaulay Putra, or the foreign educated Indian elite, or it is the ideology of J.S. Mill. It's a 19th century British ideology. But when I delved into liberal thinking in India, I discovered that the father of Indian liberalism is also the father of the Indian nation. And the father of Indian liberalism is none other than Mahatma Gandhi, who I believe was India's greatest liberal. Because a lot is known about Gandhi. A lot is known about his satyagraha and ahimsa. I think what is less known about Gandhi is his fundamental affinity to personal freedom. Gandhi was consistently skeptical of the state, consistently skeptical of the centralized state, which he believed was the embodiment of force and the embodiment of coercive force. Gandhi did not believe in centralization of authority, decentralization, local self-government, the individual. He had the mental elasticity to realize that 1 billion people were not a mass of people. Each was an individual. Each was an individual who could be motivated to be her best self, his best self, and become the satyagrahi. The satyagrahi is a journey to the individual. It is the transformed individual who creates the transformed politics. You know, there are misconceptions that satyagraha is just civil disobedience and it is just a flouting of the law. No, the satyagrahi is loyal to a higher set of laws. The satyagrahi is loyal to truth, to justice, to social justice, to welfare of the people as opposed to selfish pursuit of power. It is only when the satyagrahi is able to be loyal to those laws, to the higher laws, that the satyagrahi then has the right to break the laws which he perceives are unjust. So satyagraha is about loyalty to the higher law, not breaking the law. So this, I believe, was Gandhi's tremendous achievement, that he linked personal transformation with political transformation. And why I wanted to write this book was because I believe that successively, throughout the history of India in the post-independence period, the state has got more and more powers to itself. The state is becoming inordinately powerful. The state is like Godzilla. It is prowling around in our lives. Why do we need state for so many things? In media, I see it every day. Government control on licenses, government control on advertising, government control on access, government control on what you can say, government control on what you can't say. You have, Ms. Sharmila Tagore was talking about a censor board. Why should a modern democracy have a censor board? Why should a modern democracy have a Ministry of Information and Broadcasting? There is no equivalent of a Ministry of Information and Broadcasting anywhere in the world. I know I've had this discussion with my father, who was actually Secretary of Information and Broadcasting, and I used to often tell him, why do you exist in a democracy? You should not exist. Because the fact is, there should not be a censor board. In America, you have the Motion Pictures Association, which actually classifies films. In Britain, you have the British Broadcasting Corporation, which also, the British Filmmakers Federation, which also classifies films. There is no equivalent of a censor board in any modern democracy. It has to be scrapped forthwith. The other thing that needs to be scrapped is the law of sedition. This has to go. It is a colonial era law. There is no business having sedition on our statute books. It must be immediately scrapped. So there are so many ways in which the government of India is so very powerful in our lives, and individual freedom, and I know that all of you are crazy about your individual freedom, the right to eat, the right to love, the right to marry, the right to set up businesses, the right to think what you want, the right to read what you want, the right to write what you want. These are fundamental freedoms. How can a government take that away from us? No government can take away our liberty because our liberty is enshrined in the Constitution. And this is what is happening. Governments are taking away our liberty. Governments are taking away individual freedoms. We have to stand up and speak up, and that's why I've written this book, that there has to be a functioning liberal position on how we can defend our fundamental freedoms and stand up against the power of this big state. Now, I just want to make one point before I hand it over to you for another question, is that, this is not a Congress book or a BJP book or a bashing BJP book or a bashing Congress book. This is not a party political book. I believe there were two liberal moments in India, which is the tenure of P.V. Narasimha Rao and the tenure of A.B. Vajpayee. These showed a certain liberal, a liberal moment where governments voluntarily rolled back their powers and allowed liberty among citizens. Liberty, I believe, is indivisible. You can't have economic liberty without social liberty. You can't have social liberty without individual liberty. These were liberal moments. But the Congress has been as illiberal in the past. The BJP, I believe, is adhering to a fundamentally illiberal philosophy. And therefore, I believe that it's not party political. There are illiberal politicians dotting our landscape at the moment. Cartoonists are being arrested in Bengal. Satirists are being arrested in Maharashtra. Creative writers are being arrested across Indian states. So it's not as if this is just party political. Our ruling structure is illiberal. Our ruling ideology is illiberal, which is why I believe a functioning and vital liberal position has to be defended in times of this rampaging state power and rampaging populist religious nationalism.
Sagarika, you've explained liberalism in the context of the state and socio-political circumstances and the constitution, the founding fathers, etc. But I want to just shift the discussion a bit to something else. In your book, you've divided the book very nicely into 5 chapters, and they are titled The Liberal Patriot, The Liberal Hindu, The Liberal Thinker, The Liberal Woman. So I just wanted to ask, as a people, forget the constitution or the founding fathers, etc. Of course, everybody knows that there's been a continuous affront on the constitution. But as a people, don't you think that Indians and the Indian tradition has always been seeped in liberalism?
It has always been seeped in liberalism, which that is very well said, because, as I was saying, it's not just liberalism is not just a Western doctrine. To be liberal is not a westernized thing to be. The epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, are full of self-doubting heroes who are constantly asking questions of themselves. Even the Bhagavad Gita is an interrogation. God himself is interrogated by Arjuna about why there is a need to go into war. Even God cannot give a diktat. Even God cannot say, today, 1,000 rupee notes and 500 rupee notes are banned. God doesn't have the power in the Bhagavad Gita. God has to answer questions from Arjuna. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which I studied sadly in translation, again is a question-answer session between Gargi and Yajnavalkya. At the end of it, Yajnavalkya tells Gargi, please don't ask so many questions, otherwise your head will fall off. So the traditions of India, the Hindu traditions of India, are full of questioning. There is no concept of blasphemy in Hinduism at all. There is no concept of sin. There is no concept of a set church. Why does Hinduism now require the protection of a political party? When it has survived year after year, century after century, it has survived through invasion and through upheaval and through tumult, precisely because its domain is within. Precisely because its realm is within. Then why does it require state protection? Why does this noble ancient doctrine require the protection of those who are interested in votes? So I don't think it's wrong to say that our traditions are not liberal. I think our traditions are so deeply liberal that it actually is a mistake to impose illiberalism in the name of tradition.
Yes, and all of our literature, our poetry, everything is so seeped in liberalism. So my related question to this is, we have, of course, the Indian people, as you said, have been traditionally liberal and pluralist and secular and democratic. We may not, and even if you go to our villages, Muslim may not eat in a Hindu house, or a Hindu may not eat in a Muslim house, but they'll certainly go for burials and cremations and take part in each other's, joys and griefs. But don't you think there is a kind of a bubble or a romance of pluralism that we have been living in and have not had various discussions that we ought to have had?
I think liberals have made lots of mistakes. I think there's been a lot of, and my book is a mea culpa actually. I think, when Hillary Clinton spoke about Donald Trump and his supporters as a kind of basket of deplorables, I don't think that should be the attitude. I think those who hold progressive values or who hold liberal values should actually get out there and engage in collective action and engage in what Václav Havel called the parallel polis. That is the civil society outside of politics and outside of government, and make possible a dialogue, make possible a conversation that liberalism can benefit from. Above all, I think liberals need to tolerate dissent much more than they have. I think liberals have been too enamored of state power. They've been too enamored of grabbing pieces of the government pie, getting plush government jobs, or getting a seat on some government committee, or getting a seat on some political committee. I think liberals have been too enamored of state power, and Gandhi warned against this time and time again, that the idea is to work with people, the idea is to work in civil society, and that is where the conversations have to happen. So I think that a lot of the time the liberals have placed a lot of too much emphasis on state power and government power rather than work with civil society. For example, the Sabarimala case, right? Now in that case, I think, for example, it's absurd that a menstruating woman should be barred from a religious shrine. And in fact, the court upheld that ruling and allowed women to enter. But I would say that rather than use the diktat of the courts, or rather than use administrative power to win over the dissenters or to win over the doubters, I think what Gandhi would have advocated is conversation, talking to the stakeholders, building bridges. That is how social reform happened in India. Through conversation, through dialogue, through social relations. You're not going to be able to change people's minds if you hit them with diktats or if you hit them with court orders. That just puts people's backs up. If you need to create a dialogue, you need to talk to stakeholders. That is the long way out. But that is the Gandhian way, is to dialogue on the basis of friendship. The other learning from Gandhi that I think liberals should think about, and those of us who call ourselves liberals, we are a small group, and we are aiming to kind of revitalize Gandhi, because I believe he holds the key to a kind of liberal revival. And I think that he spoke a lot about the need to respect your enemy. You can talk to an enemy, you can argue with someone, you can disagree with someone, but that doesn't mean that person is your enemy, or that doesn't mean that person is someone who you personally hate. So the ability to dialogue, I think that is a better way to go than using state power and court diktats to bring change, because that ultimately, it's resulted in a conflagration in Kerala. So it's much better, I believe, to go the way of dialogue.
Also, something needs to be said about civility of debate.
Yes.
Currently, there isn't any. I think it would be a very good idea to have some civility in debate. Before I ask you to read something from your book, one more question. If indeed we Indians have been so inherently, so intrinsically liberal, why have we not been able to stand up to this affront on liberalism?
Well, I think we have to look at the circumstances in which we exist today. This is the era of what I call the elected autocrat. Democracy's enemy in the 1930s was communism. Democracy's enemy in the 1940s was fascism. Today, the enemy of democracy is democracy. Because it is through the democratic process that you are getting leaders who are actually turning their back on democracy. Because democracy is not about majority rule. It cannot be about majority rule, because in democracies, majorities change. Electoral majorities are transient. Electoral majorities do not last forever. So you may be in a majority today, tomorrow you may be in a minority. You may be a party you may not have voted for comes to power. That is why democracy strives to protect the minority. But what we have today is majoritarian democracy, and throughout the world you have the rise of the elected autocrats. which is Donald Trump in the US, or Recep Erdogan in Turkey, or Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, or you have an Erdogan, or you have Viktor Orban. We have our own elected authoritarian. So I believe this is the era of the strongman autocrat. This is the era of the strongman autocrat. And we are becoming worshippers of power. Why do Indians worship power? I think we need to also think about this. The Economist had a really interesting article on the cult of the superhero. Batman, Spider-Man, and how we admire them because they can slash through systems and actually get the job done. But the fact is, it's the systems and the processes that actually make all the difference. So we are enamored of the strong man. We are worshippers of power. The media is making us worshippers of power because the media is entirely personality driven. The media is promoting personality level politics. So I believe that the worship of power and the worship of power for its own sake, decisive displays of power, the Dabang, the Bahubali, these are the figures, the icons of today. So our worship of power is making us worshipful of an authoritarian democracy, and I believe this is the rise of these illiberal leaders. There is the sort of lure of the system changer, that the ancien regime is corrupt, and it is, what has happened all this time has been elitist and feeble and effete, and soon there'll be a system changer and somebody will come in and break up all the rules and break up all the processes and become the great white hope of the people. This is the populist illiberal dream which has taken hold of the whole world. So I believe that this is, and the reason for this is because of the kind of ways in which previous regimes have dealt with corruption and have dealt with undemocratic behavior. There has been, in my book I write about illiberal secularism. Secularism in our country has also often been illiberal. It's been practiced in illiberal ways, which has led to a backlash. So there are many reasons why we're looking at the rise of a kind of illiberal democracy, and it is because of this rise of illiberal democracy that I believe that liberal values are suffering.
But do you think it's here to stay?
I think it's probably here to stay for a good while. I don't see much challenge. I think there is a challenge, for example, from civil society. There is a challenge from groups like yours, from the people who are forming civil society groups. But politically, it's very difficult to challenge the illiberal autocrats.
Somebody was saying the other day that when Gandhiji was asked, what do you think of the British civilization? He famously remarked, I think it would be a very good idea.
Yeah.
And this person who was speaking said, I have the same thing to say about opposition. I think Indian opposition would be a very good idea.
Yeah. So that's the other point, of course, is the state of the Indian opposition.
State of the Indian opposition. Can I ask you to read something from your book?
And then I'll happy to take some questions if you like.
Yes, I have one last question after you read.
Banned, banned, banned. How many bans are there today anyway? How many aspects of our behavior are policed? Do you want to eat a steak in Maharashtra? Sorry, it's banned. Do you want to read Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses? Sorry, that's banned too. Are you living in Gujarat and do you want to read the book Great Soul by Joseph Lelyveld? Sorry, you may not have heard of the book, but it's banned. Want to see the movie 50 Shades of Grey? You may not want to see the movie, but in any case you can't because it's banned. Do you want to see the play Me Nathuram Godse Bolto Hai? Sorry, that's also banned. Does Priya Pillai of Greenpeace want to voice her views in London? Sorry, she can't go to London. Bans are an entirely un-Hindu thing. Think about it. Is anything banned in Hinduism? Almost nothing. What's common between liberal democracy and Hindu philosophy? A constant search for answers, a quest for knowledge, a starting assumption that we cannot know everything. But governments remain stubbornly convinced that they possess absolute knowledge, which is why they want to implement policies through bans and diktats. People of goodwill may on occasion differ on answers on specific public policies. Democracy provides a platform to legally and formally negotiate a common ground. But when you stop that common ground, you then seek refuge in illiberal authoritarianism. Hindu philosophy, on the other hand, is full of debates. There is little absolute knowledge or absolute certainty. The epics, particularly the Mahabharata, are tales of heroes constantly plagued by self-doubt. They constantly debate the right course of action. The Gita is a treatise of Arjuna's tryst with self-doubt. The Upanishads are a question-answer session on philosophy. The Ramayana's heroes are as flawed as they are noble. Ram is God, yet he is human. Ram lives in the divine realm, yet he lives in the mortal realm. He is sublime and divine because of his essential humanity.
Ma'am?
So I think that at the end of the day, flaws, disagreements, arguments, the ability to disagree, the ability to recognize flaws are all fundamentally democratic. If we are engaged in a puritanical quest for purity, for the perfect solution, some may call it the final solution, or for a kind of best which becomes the enemy of democracy, that quest for that horrifying, terrifying perfection, I believe is anti-democratic and anti-liberal. Perfection, when manifested in a quest for power or when manifested in a quest to engineer society, can become deeply illiberal. Which is why Gandhi was constantly talking about his own flaws as a human being, and the recognition of flaws as human beings so that we can remain attached to the flawed yet noble project of liberal democracy. It's flawed, yet it's noble. If we demand perfection, we are then going down the road of absolutism and authoritarianism.
When you were reading this portion about the bands, the various bands, I was reminded of this really humorous verse in Urdu which captures this so beautifully. You know, in the mid-90s, mutton was banned in Delhi for a month. And people don't remember this, but it was banned. And Sagar Khayyami, this amazing humorist, was there, and he said, "एक महीना हो चुका है, बंद है हम पर मटन. दावतों में खा रहे हैं भिंडियां अहले सुखन. खा के घुइयां क्या दिखलाएं शायरी का बातपन, हो गए पालक का पत्ता नाजुकी से गुल बदन. और नफरतों की जंग में देखो तो क्या क्या हो गया. नफरतों की जंग में देखो तो क्या क्या हो गया. सब्जियां हिंदू हुई, बकरा मुसलमान." This is what is happening. This is exactly what you just read also. So my last question before we take a couple of questions from the audience is, everything is banned, you know, from meat to who you should love, what you should wear, ye mat khao, wo mat pehno. What should liberals do?
I think what liberals should do is first of all be very brave, because you know one of the aspects of the big state is that it empowers the street mobs. Street mobs are the necessary accessory of the big state, because these are mobs which believe they are extending the ideological agenda of the big state, because the big state itself is ideological and it wants to coerce people, and so these mobs develop which enforce the state's power on people. Now, so you know, we're sitting here and having a lovely conversation. If a group of people bursts in and says, "Arrest this woman, she's an anti-national," none of us will be able to do anything. Only Mr. Manishankar Iyer will be able to help us. But then he's also an anti-national. So I mean we won't have any recourse. So basically, you know, we are powerless against the street mob. Ms. Sharmila Tagore spoke about the censor board. Why should the censor board have lists of words which are banned from films? You know, certain lists are banned, certain words are banned from scripts. Now, what happens with these kind of bans is that the street mob gets emboldened and enforces those bans, even if those on a formal level the bans are withdrawn. Those bans are now withdrawn. Those words are no longer banned, but the street mobs are still pursuing the ideological agenda, and they will wreak havoc on whoever is using those words. So I think liberals need to be brave. We need to engage in collective action. You know, as I said, these groups are excellent because it's collective action. Don't, you know, sit and rage on the internet for hours arguing with strangers, because it's not going to get you anywhere. Engage with people, have the conversations, and don't get worked up. Don't watch TV news. Switch it off. Switch it off. Why do people watch TV news? Why do they watch it? I can't figure it out. Only if you have low blood pressure and you want to raise your blood pressure, maybe you could watch it. But otherwise, just switch it off. Don't watch it. Don't watch it. It's doing bad things to us. So I would say switch off TV news. Have the real conversations. Don't listen to the man screaming, "The nation wants to know." Avoid him completely. And and also, it's hard to be arguing for freedom. It's hard to be arguing for unpopular values. But don't stop doing it. It's difficult to stick out in a crowd. It's difficult to be alone. But if you're alone, you're helpless and you're bewildered. So collectives are important, to form collective action and to pursue a collective agenda. That's very important.
Thank you very much. So, I don't think, do we have time for questions?
Oh, okay, then maybe one question. Yes.
So we can take just one question.
That's because he's been putting up his hand.
I was a little curious when you spoke that in the traditional Hindu society is so liberal. You know, when you see the casteism today, which is the caste attacks today, and which is so ingrained partially in the ancient culture, don't you think? I mean, in this sense, how do we reflect that Hinduism is so liberal? Even when Gandhi, for instance, even he was opposed to untouchability, even he, maybe in a more liberal way, also said that I want casteism, but I want to oppose untouchability. But today, it's so ingrained in Hinduism. Why do you think Hinduism is so liberal?
I think philosophically the doctrine is liberal, and there have been many thinkers within Hinduism who have emerged to challenge these doctrines, you know, whether it was a Vivekananda, whether it was a Gandhi, whether it was a Ram Mohan Roy, whether it was the Arya Samaj, whether it was a Prarthana Samaj, whether it was Phule, whether it was Gokhale. They were all Hindus who from within Hinduism challenged these doctrines. So I think on a basic philosophic level, there are so many liberal lessons to be learned from the doctrine, but of course the practices are very illiberal.
Do we have time for one last? Yes.
Is there any limitation to liberalism?
Limitation. With the rule of law is very important for liberalism and for liberal democracy. If we don't have rule of law, we don't have anything. You know, if we don't have rule of law, if the rule of law is just a big joke, if the law is just a laughing matter, then there is no law, there is no liberal democracy, there is no liberalism. So within the for liberalism to be operational, we need to have rule of law.
Constitution itself prescribes those
Constitution
restrictions. Just one last question, the lady here, and then we'll end with this.
Hi Sagrika, this is no question for you. It is just to add to your ban. I remember the share. ये कैसा दस्तूर जुबाबंदी है तेरी महफिल में, यहाँ तो बात करने को तरसती है जुबान.
Absolutely. You know, I remember a line from Shabana Azmi. I know you're talking to Shabana Azmi tomorrow, and Shabana actually said that she was so opposed to the play Nathuram Godse Bolte Hai.
Yes.
Because the Nathuram Godse's politics is repugnant to her as it is to all of us. But she still campaigned that the play should not be banned. So I think democracy entails that we put up with offences to our icons.
Excuse me, ma'am. I have a question as well. My name is Mayank and I'm a law student. And I'm a nationalist and a liberal as well. And yes, these things go hand in hand. And I'm really sorry to say that there is no such thing as hyper-nationalist. Being a nationalist and being a very good nationalist is not a bad thing. Ask the army soldiers about that. And man, mostly I don't think that...
Do you have a question?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Please
sir.
ask that.
Yeah. And I think being a liberal is just a show off these days. Liberal means equality before the law, equality for every citizen.
That's right.
Yes, ma'am. And moreover, and avoiding the extreme social steps the government is taking. But I think the only last method has been opted by the liberals. There is no equality. I have seen your post, ma'am. Sorry to say, you've been bashing the one particular community, calling them Modi Bhakts.
No, I don't think so.
Before 2014, we were the same people who voted for Congress as well. Please.
None of this is party political. None of this is
I
party
have seen your
political.
post, ma'am. I'm a youth. I'm just 25 years old.
Thanks. Actually, I believe that patriotism lies in being truthful and telling the truth.
Yeah. So, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that last question. That is the beauty of democracy, by the way. Had there been no liberalism, you wouldn't have been asking this question.
Yeah, so, thank you to our constitution.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, we'll really have to end this session because she has a flight to catch.
Yeah. Very wrong. You're absolutely right. It should not be. It should not be liberals. Be liberal.
Dialogue, but nowhere do we see any dialogue with anybody.
We have to become. Yes, it must be less intolerant. Must be less intolerant.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So the one great takeaway from this session is, do not watch TV news.